This isn't really so much of a lecture as an entertainment. So once I've introduced it, you're welcome to, come and go as you please and listen, treat it any way you like. I'm going to play a CD and comment on it a little bit, not a great deal, because otherwise we'll run out of time. Now, the name of the CD is Hashisheen, The End of Law. And this is a project I put together basically with Bill Laswell. Some of you may be familiar with his work. He's a great musician and a great producer, and is interested in this realm that I wanted to explore. So we have very fruitful collaboration. I just listened to Bill Berkson talking about collaboration between poets and painters. Well, this was, I guess you could say, a collaboration between a reader, that's me, and a musician. I've given up considering myself a writer, actually. I consider myself to be a reader. But be that as it may, the theme is a certain Islamic sect of the Middle Ages, which is commonly known as the Assassins, and due to a creative but probably wrong etymology, this word is connected with hashish. Some people believe that the word assassin comes into the English language from the Arabic word hashish. It could be, it's not very likely really. But I used the word hashisheen, which means hashish smokers or users, with Arabic plural een on the end, to indicate that this collection of texts and music is not really about the real assassins of the real 12th century, but it's much more about the legend of the assassins, in which case anything goes, obviously. You don't have to stick to any kind of historical accuracy. So the texts that I've chosen, I think there are 20 of them altogether, 22 actually, but some of them are very short, are from a wide variety of Islamic and non-Islamic literature, ranging from authentic, more or less authentic material about the assassins from contemporary sources, to the literature of the European Middle Ages, which spread the legend to the West, and notably most best known probably from Marco Polo, where he tells the story of the old man of the mountain. And you'll hear that story, so I won't go into it. The version that I used actually was not from. Did Marco Polo get in? Yeah, Marco Polo got in, but also Arnold of Lubeck, who was another medieval chronicler. There's no reason to believe that these stories are accurate. They were probably travelers' tales that the Crusaders spread around, and seeped this legend of the drug-crazy fanatical assassins who obey the will of their lord unhesitatingly, even to sacrifice themselves in the belief that they would go to go to paradise after they had martyred themselves for the cause. This was such a striking image. For example, it entered troubadour poetry as an image for perfect love. That the perfect troubadour lover would, if his lady love commanded him, would leap off a mountain. You know, this. Through poetic metaphors, then the assassins have always been remembered in the West as a typical mysterious legend of the mysterious East. And I'm playing with that by choosing both Oriental sources and non-Oriental sources, including Rimbaud, who wrote Time of the Assassins, and you'll hear Patti Smith give the most wonderful performance of that, and Gérard de Nerval, and then finally, of course, Brian Geisen and William Burroughs are both represented. And I suppose it was probably through Burroughs that I became interested in the assassins in the first place. I can't remember now, it's so long ago. But certainly in Naked Lunch already, Hassan-i-Sabah, the old man of the mountain, and the legend of the assassins, which Burroughs got from very spotty reading, I must say, at that time. That he'd been turned on to a couple of books by Brian Geisen. But they too, just like the troubadours, became enamored for their own reasons of this legend. Had something to do with the drug interest, no doubt. So you can see that this is a, oh gosh, I don't know, a mosaic, a gallimaufry, a palimpsest of sources on the assassins. And before we start, I should maybe give you a little information about the production. No, I mean, I'll do that. I guess we'll do that as we go along, because you don't want to have to sit and listen to the whole thing all the way through. But the first reading, which is very short, is from an Ismaili poet named Azizi, and is read by Susan Dahim, who's a very talented singer and musician of Iranian origin, friend of Bill Laswell's. And then next you'll hear the Chronicle of Arnold of Lubeck and his version of the Legend of the Old Man of the Mountain. And then I think I'll play through the William Burroughs piece, which comes next and is from The Western Lands, which was Burroughs' last book, and he did a much more accurate rendition of Hassan-i-Sabbah there. In part, I have to say, with all humility due to me, because I sent Burroughs a lot of material on the assassins while he was working on The Western Lands, and he was actually kind enough to credit me in the acknowledgments for bringing some new information to him. So we're going to have a fairly long reading by William Burroughs, and I'm really sorry James Grauerholtz is gone, because I actually wanted to dedicate this whole afternoon to him, since it was thanks to him that I was able to use the Burroughs and the Geisen material. He was very, very helpful and generous about that. And I'll just, before I start finally, I'll just read this one little paragraph introduction, which will sum up what I've said and set the mood and give you a little bit of factoid background. The Assassins, a medieval Persian sect of esoteric terrorists, founded in 1090 A.D. by Hassan-i-Sabbah, the Old Man of the Mountain, at the Rock of Alamut. The ruins of Alamut, of course, still to be seen if you are enterprising enough to go to Iran and visit there. I don't know anyone who's done that in recent years, but it's still a pretty rough trip. Anyone who opposed their secret free-thinking propaganda might be rubbed out by a fanatical hitman. Hassan-i-Sabbah built an exquisite garden at Alamut as a lure and reward for his secret agents. According to legend, he gave them hashish before showing them the garden and told them it was paradise. Now, of course, a lot of people have speculated about this hashish business. None of the ancient sources actually use that word, to the best of my knowledge. They always say a drug or a mysterious drink or something like that. But it was widely believed in the East that the assassins used hashish, and it was a way of calling them crazy, to call them hashish smokers or eaters. And maybe that's the way this legend arose. Needless to say, the modern-day Ismailis, the Aga Khan, whom you may have heard of, is the direct lineal descendant of the Old Men of the Mountain, and they strenuously deny that there was any truth to this hashish legend. So you can take their word for it, or you can just indulge in legendary romanticism, as I did when I put this material together. So I say the word assassin may come from Hashisheen, user of grass, literally. The resurrection was declared at Alamut, and the chains of the law were broken. Nothing is true, everything is permitted. Again, this line which Burroughs made famous now, nothing is true, everything is permitted, is nowhere to be found in authentic Ismaili assassin literature. There are phrases which are reminiscent of that, but this is probably part of the legend. From a network of mountain castles in Iran and Syria, they opposed both Islam and the Crusaders of the Christians, scandalizing the world with their lawless heresy, till they and the Garden of Alamut were destroyed around 1257 by the Mongol hordes. Their religion still survives today. Our CD, however, has nothing to do with that religion. We're more interested in myth than fact, in quotes. Fragments of assassin writings, descriptions of them by their enemies, accounts of them by travelers like Marco Polo, and some magical legends are woven together here with the correct music, or what we anyway felt was correct music, to produce, under the proper conditions, and I hope some of you are, a visionary experience of the Hashisheen and their inner history. The complete texts from which these readings are taken can be found in the book which accompanies the CD, along with some suggestions for further reading. This work is dedicated to the memory of Brian Geisen and William S. Burroughs, two great 20th century Hashisheen and assassins of the tyrannical word. And that's signed by me and Bill Laswell and Janet Reenstra, who's Bill's dear life companion and co-producer of this project. And as I said, all right, now let me give you the credits. The first reading is just Susan Dahim. The second reading, The Old Man of the Mountain, is read by Genesis P. Arridge. Is introduced by Genesis and read by Percy Howard, music by Bill Laswell. And the Western Lands, the selection is, of course, read by William Burroughs and Iggy Pop, both appear. Music by Techno Animal. So, we'll just start.
Danger is a biologic necessity for men like sleeping dreams. If you face death for that time, for the period of direct confrontation, you are immortal. For the Western middle classes, danger is a rarity and erupts only with a sudden, random shock. And yet we are all in danger at all times, since our death exists. Mektub, it is written, waiting to present the aspect of surprised recognition. Is there a technique for confronting death without immediate physical danger? Can one reach the Western lands without physical death? These are the questions that Hassan I. Saba asked.
What did Hassan I. Saba find out in Egypt? He found out that the Western lands exist and how to find them. This was the garden he showed his followers. What was Hassan I. Saba like? Who was he? For the last 40 years of his life, Hassan I. Saba occupied the mountain fortress of Alamut in what is now northern Iran. From Alamut, the old man dispatched his assassins when he decided they were ready and their missions necessary. It is said that he could reach as far as Paris. As for the training that the apprentice assassins received, there is no precise information. What little historical data survives tends to be misleading, such as the notorious account given by Marco Polo of a heaven of Uris promised to the martyr where he would be wafted when his work was done. There were no women in Alamut. It is related that Hassan I. Saba had his own son beheaded for smuggling a bottle of wine into his quarters. No doubt this was not the real reason. Obviously, the boy was plotting against the old man's life. It happens in the best Eastern families. Beyond that, there is little. Did he ever tell a joke or smile or drink? Some say that in his later years he became an alcoholic. and that the smuggled bottle of wine was intended for him and poisoned. Rumors. But very little of the man emerges, and what we do see is not sympathetic. One can't help thinking of these evil old mullahs with their closed, harsh faces. I mean that his personal life, his habits, his eccentricities are completely occluded. This may well have been deliberate on his part. Oh yes, I knew him personally, but I never knew him at all. He was a man with many faces and many characters. Literally, he changed unrecognizably from one day to the next. At times, his face was possessed by a dazzling radiance of pure spirit. At other times, the harsh gray lineaments of fear and despair gave notice of defeat on some battleground of the spirit. Battles are fought to be won, and this is what happens when you lose. One thing I know, he was a frontline officer who never asked his men to do what he would not do himself. He was ready to fight beside them, inch by bloody inch.
Iggy Pop did a good reading, I think, but he kept consistently mispronouncing the name of, and so does Burroughs, by the way. It's Hassan Saba, not Hassan I Saba. Yeah, he said Iran. You know, I mean, we could have gotten professional voiceover people, and we could have, trained them to pronounce all the words correct. The idea was to bring together people who have felt moved by these legends. Almost all of them introduced, through Burroughs to this material.
Did Burroughs write the text?
Yeah, that was from Western Lands.
So it's all Burroughs' text?
Yeah, the last part that you heard was all from Western Lands. It was Burroughs reading part of it and Iggy Pop reading the second half of it. So let's see now. Let's do 3 by 3. I guess it's an easy enough format. Was everybody able to understand the words of everything, or is there any reason why I should read these texts before you hear them? Or no, I don't think so either. It's all pretty understandable. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, well, I didn't bother to explain that because it's the same idea in Christianity, really. It's the idea of the resurrection. It's also common to Islam. It will happen at the end of time. So when the assassins proclaimed that it had already happened, this was quite a radical act, and of course caused a lot of problems with the Islamic with the Orthodox, because after the resurrection the law no longer applies. You see, after the resurrection, people will be free of the religious law, and by proclaiming the resurrection, therefore they said now it's all right to drink wine. It's all right to commit sexual immoralities or whatever. So it was a kind of antinomian thing to do. In the
resurrection refers to being in the Western land.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I think that's the way Burroughs interpreted it anyway. Yeah. So anyway, the next reading is by Susan Dahim again, this time with music by her. And it's from a Sufi poet named Mahmoud Shabastari, died about 1320, from a poem called The Rose Garden of the Mystery, which is very influential for the Ismailis. And there are some people, they even go so far as to say Shabastari was an Ismaili. Then the next selection will be the famous Marco Polo text, really the kind of ur text for the legend. And the music's by Nikki Skopolaitis, and I'm doing the reading. After that is a poem from Nasser Khusro, who was a famous Ismaili poet, a didactic poet. And this is from his autobiographical poem where he describes how he went from Iran to Cairo to meet the caliph, the leader of the Ismaili sect, who was in political control of Egypt at that time. Khusro died around 1060, so this is before Hassan-i-Sabah, actually. It's only 100 years later that Hassan-i-Sabah comes along, also goes to Cairo and Egypt to get his initiation, but then became embroiled in a quarrel over the succession. And when he went back to Iran, he started his own sect, a heresy within a heresy within a heresy, actually. So that's I'm also reading that selection, and the music is by Bill Laswell himself. Okay.
The universe, his wine cellar. The atom's heart, his measuring cup. Intellect is drunk. Earth, drunk. Sky, drunk. Heaven perplexed, with him restlessly seeking. Love in its heart, hoping at least for a single whiff of the fragrance of that wine, that clear wine the angels drank. From that immaterial pot, a sip of the dregs, the rest poured out upon the dust. One sip, and the elements whirl in drunken dance, falling now into water, now in blazing fire. And from that smell of that spilled cup, man rises from the dust and soars to heaven.
This prince was called Alauddin and was Mohammedan. He had created, in a lovely valley enclosed between two very high mountains, a very beautiful garden, full of every variety of fruit and trees that could be obtained. And around these plantations, various palaces and pavilions decorated with golden ornaments, paintings and furniture all made of silk. He had brought young girls of perfect beauty and full of charm to live here, and they were trained to sing, to play all sorts of instruments, to dance, and above all, to make the most seductive advances to men that can be imagined. This is the reason why the old man had this place built. Muhammad, having said that those who obeyed his will would go to paradise, where they would find all the pleasures and delights of the world, beautiful women and rivers of milk and honey, this man wanted to pretend that he could make anyone he wished enter this very paradise. No one could penetrate into the garden we described, for they had built at the entrance to the valley a very fortified and impregnable castle. It could only be entered by a secret road.
In case you didn't follow that, this is the gist of the legend, is that Hassan-i-Sabbah has a fake paradise built, secret, hidden behind walls. And when he recruits the young men, he gives them the secret potion, which I think actually must have contained opium and perhaps other things as well as hashish, if there really was such a potion. And then they drag the young man into this paradise where he meets the young girls. By the way, you notice Burroughs says there were no women at Alamut, but here Marco Polo says there were, so you can take your pick. And they spend a couple of days in intoxicated glory, making love and drinking wine, doing all these forbidden things. Then they take the potion again, they fall asleep, they're dragged out, and then Hassan-i-Sabbah says, you see, I can send you to paradise anytime I want, so take this dagger and go out and kill my enemy, and even if you die in the process, don't worry, you'll be back in that delicious garden. So that's the essence of the legend. There's actually no archaeological evidence for a garden ever having existed at Alamut. So people have spent a good deal of thought on that, as you can imagine. There's just no place that such a garden could have been. It's a rock with a very small space on the top of it. So where do these ideas come from? That's the question that I'm really trying to pose here, I guess. So now on to Nasser Khusro, who will give a similar intoxicated, bejeweled image of the great city of Cairo in the 11th century.
Then, one day, I reached those city gates where angels are servants, where planets and stars are slaves, a garden of roses and pines girded round with walls of emerald and jasper trees, set in a desert of gold-embroidered silk, its springs sweet as honey, the river of paradise, a city which only virtue can aspire to reach, a city whose cypresses are like the blades of intellect, a city whose sages wear brocaded robes woven of silk. And here, before these gates, my reason spoke. Here within these walls, find what you seek and do not leave without it. So I approached the guardian of the gate and told him of my search. Rejoice, he answered, your mine has produced a jewel, for beneath this land of truth there flows a crystal ocean of precious pearls and pure, clear water. This is the lofty sphere of exalted stars. Aye, it is paradise itself, the abode of Houris.
You've heard Houris mentioned several times. These are the maidens of paradise who will entertain the faithful throughout an eternity of drunkenness without hangover. The next little selection is from Freya Stark, who was a wonderful English eccentric adventurer who managed to get to Alamut back in the 1940s, I think, and wrote a book about it. And the reading is by Nicole Blackman. And her, by the way, it was her book that Geisen read and turned him on to the whole subject. Sorry, the title of her book, I think it's The Road to Alamut, I believe. Let me just check. The Valleys of the Assassins and Other Persian Travels, London, 1936. So it was even earlier than the 40s. It must have been maybe even in the 20s. A very intrepid lady indeed, went everywhere. Then the next section is called Castles. Reading is Percy Howard, music by Anton Fear. And this is a kind of mosaic of fragments which I took from the Persian historian Juwayni, who was actually hired by the Mongol hordes to whitewash their conquest of the world. He was a paid intellectual hack of Genghis Khan, basically. So his treatment of the assassins is very, very negative, but quite poetic. And then number 9 is Hashish Poem, reading by Nicole Blackman, music by Bill Laswell, and we used some outtakes of a Persian singer that Bill had in his archive. We tried to find out who this singer was and didn't succeed. The poem itself is a tribute to Ibn Khamis or to Ibn al-Ama, who would have been either one of them around the 12th or 13th century. And it's a poem in praise of hashish. So Freya Stark, and then Juwayni, and then the hashish poem.
I had long wished to go there, but there were obstacles. One of them was that I could not find it on my map.
See to your castles, castles which raised their hands against the heavenly spheres and assaulted the constellations. Men cannot reach its highest peaks, nor can the birds, not even the vulture and the eagle. And the wishes of a seeker have not desired it, and its dogs have barked only at the stars. The castles of Rukn ad-Din, which rubbed horns with the horn of the bull, whose crags from their great elevation placed their hands on the girdle of Orion, and which vied for glory with the palaces of Saturn.
Swear off wine and drink from the cup of Hadar, amber scented, smaragdite green. Look, it is offered to you by a slender Turkish gazelle, who sways delicate as a willow bough. As he prepares it, you might compare it to the traces of fine down on a blushing cheek, since even the slightest breeze makes it move, as if in the coolness of a drunken morning, when silvery pigeons might whisper in branches, filling its vegetal soul with their mutual emotions. How many meanings it has, significances unknown to wine. So close your ears to the old censor's slander.
You'll notice that this poem says, "Swear off wine and drink from the cup of Hagar." Actually, smoking, most people believe that smoking never reached the old world until it was discovered in the new world, the actual idea to smoke something. So probably all the drug use in the old world up until that time was oral, either eating or drinking. This is a controversial point, but nevertheless, that's the general accepted view. And then I just wanted to repeat the last line of that poem. How many meanings it has, significances unknown to wine, so close your ears to the old censor's slander. Good advice for the age of the war on drugs, or the war on some drugs. All right, the next three pieces. We'll start with Sinan's Boast, read by my buddy Ira Cohen, music by Bill Laswell. Now, Sinan was a disciple of Hassan Isaba, whom he sent to Syria. And he's probably the old man of the mountain that the Crusaders and Marco Polo were thinking of rather than Hassan himself, because he was the one who came in contact with the Crusaders. And he was quite a remarkable person, a magician, a warrior, a statesman, a schemer, an intriguer, a genius, a mystic, whatever you like. This text may or may not be really by him. It's attributed to him. It's so outrageously heretical that one wonders how anyone could have dared. Okay, that's Sinan Rashid. Then next is a very short little piece from Mahmoud Shabastari again, read by Nicole Blackman with music by Anton Fear, called Assassinations. It's just a little short quote from Shabastari. And then we'll hear Juvaini again, his poetic description of the Mongols actually destroying Alamut. A reading by Percy Howard, music by Paul Schutz.
I am the master of what is. The dwelling is not empty of the ancient sprouts. I am the witness, the spectator, dispenser of mercy in the beginning and the end. Do not be misled by the changing of forms. You say so-and-so passed and so-and-so came. I tell you to consider the faces as all one face, as long as the master of existence is in existence, present, existent. Do not depart from the orders of him who received your engagement, whether Arab or Persian or Turk or Greek. I am the ruler, dispenser of orders and of will. Whoever knows me inwardly possesses the truth. Knowledge of me is not perfect unless I say, my slave, obey me and know me in true knowledge of me. I shall make you alive like me. You shall not die. And rich you shall be not poor, and great you shall not be abased. Hear and pray, you will be advantaged. I am the one present, and you are those present in my presence. I am the one near who does not depart. If I punish you, it is my justice. If I forgive you, it is my generosity and my excellence. I am the master of mercy and dispenser of forgiveness and of the clear truth. Praise to God, Lord of the worlds. This is a clear explanation.
He makes one faithful, another an infidel. He fills the world with tumult and wrong. Taverns have been edified by his lips. All my desire has been accomplished through him.
In that breeding ground of heresy, in the root bar of Alamut, the home of the wicked adherents of Hassan Saba and the evil followers of the practice of libertinism, there remains not one stone of the foundations upon another. And in that flourishing abode of innovation, the artist of eternity past wrote with the pen of violence upon the portico of each one's dwelling the verse, "These their houses are empty ruins." And in the marketplace of those wretches' kingdom, the Muezzin Destiny has uttered the cry of, "Away then with the wicked people." Their luckless womenfolk, like their empty religion, have been utterly destroyed. And the gold of those crazy double-dealing counterfeiters, which appeared to be unalloyed, has proven to be base lead.
It says, in that breeding ground of heresy, in the Rudbar of Alamut, that means the valley of Alamut, there was a settled valley of several villages under Alamut, where presumably where the rank and file lived and grew, had farms to support the community. And he says, Giovanni says, not one stone is left upon another. Well, that's actually not true. There's plenty of stones left at Alamut, and you can go see them. But their houses are empty ruins. That was true enough. And their luckless women folk, like their empty religion, have been utterly destroyed. Well, the religion wasn't utterly destroyed. It survived and is quite widespread to this day. And then he ends up by saying, the gold of those crazy double-dealing counterfeiters, which appeared to be unalloyed, has proven to be base lead. Well, that's his opinion. Okay, the next piece is, we called it The Divine Self. The reading is by Jah Wobble, with music by Jah Wobble. An English musician, is really a very talented and interesting guy. Huh? You know him? I don't know his history, but I met him briefly, and I was very struck with him. I thought he was a delightful, really sensitive, brilliant guy. This reading, let me see, there's a whole lot of stuff here, engineered by different people. I won't give you all this. Jah Wobble is the basic guy here. The piece is from Jafar Sadek. Now, Jafar Sadek was actually the 6th Shiite imam, and a very, very important figure. He was not an Ismaili, but his son was Ismail, who was the first imam recognized, the first leader recognized by the Ismailis, and then that whole line becomes a separate religion, so to speak. So the words of Jafar Sadek have a lot of influence for all Shiites, including the Orthodox Shiites, such as are in Iran and followed the Ayatollah Khomeini, and the unorthodox Shiites, which include the Assassins and various other sects as well. And then after that piece, which is rather long, comes another rather long piece called Morning High, and this is the Rimbaud poem, which is usually called Morning of the Assassins. And the reading is by Lily Mercier Desclous and Patti Smith, with music by Nikki Skopolidis, Patti Smith, blah, 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 additional guitar, Oliver Ray. Now, I don't know who did this translation. I did my own translation of Rimbaud, and I've put it into the booklet here, but Patti came up with her own translation. Maybe it's hers, I'm not sure. So that's fine. It's a lovely translation, and I really think this is the most striking performance on the whole CD. So we'll just hear these two pieces this time instead of 3, because they're both rather long.
The Imam Jafar Sadiq replied one day to a man who asked him whether it was true that on the day of the resurrection God would be visible to all. Yes, said the Imam. He is visible even before that day. He has been visible since the day when he asked, "Am I not your Lord?" But the true believers have seen him even in this world. Dost thou not see him? And the man replied, "Oh my Lord, I see thee. I see. Permit that by thy authority I go and announce it to the others. But the Imam said, no, say nothing to anyone, for the people are stupid and ignorant. They will not understand. They will disavow you and hurl the anathema at you. This subject was always kept hidden from the unworthy and the incompetent. It has been confided only to a small number. If one of the true Gnostics is somewhere, the people slander him and mock him. Each thing, whether it be exoteric or esoteric, can be for you yourself a form of worship. Worship assuredly is identical with knowledge. But worship in every case forms a thing in itself, different from the other thing. Knowledge by the organ of your eyes means that you know this human form that guides you, which is proper to the person who bear outwardly all the features of simple human reality. But it is not with the eyes that you can obtain a representation of the heart. The knowledge of the heart is different from that of sight. It is pure luminescence shining for itself. And neither have I the power to tell you more, nor you the capacity to hear more.
I have a feeling that Jar Wobble's East London accent might have made that a little difficult for some of you to follow, so I want to read just a bit of it. Well, I'll read the whole thing because it's an important text. The Imam Jafar Sadiq replied one day to a man who asked him whether it was true that on the day of resurrection God would be visible to all. Yes, said the Imam, he is visible even before that day. He has been visible since the day when he asked, that is when God asked, am I not your Lord? The true believers have seen him even in this world. Dost thou not see him? Says the Imam to the man. And the man replied, O my Lord, I see thee. The implication is obvious. Permit that by thy authority I go and announce it to the others. But the Imam said, no, say nothing to anyone, for the people are stupid and ignorant. They will not understand. They will disavow you and hurl the anathema at you. Then the rest is actually, I won't bother to read because it's just more theological explanation of this point, that there's some kind of mystical identity being proposed here between the Imam and God. It's not an exact identity, and if one were to simply run out and say to the ordinary people, the Imam is like God or is God, there would be a misunderstanding. But this is the secret inner truth that's being proposed, that when you achieve enlightenment, you become identical with the divine. And that's the essence of heresy, really, when you come right down to it. Organized religion says no to this, and heresy says yes, must be the case. So now we see, leaping a number of centuries, we get to Arthur Rimbaud and Patti Smith.
Enter the atrocious street band,
ton phare atroce, je ne trébuche
where
pas.
I won't stumble.
Chevalet féerique,
The fairy rack-hurrah for the
Hurrah pour
unattainable
l'œuvre inouïe.
alchemy and the marvelous
Corps merveilleux
body.
pour la première fois.
For the first time, it all started.
Cela commença sous les rires des
Beneath the
enfants.
laughter of children, it will end with
Cela
them.
finira par nous.
This poison will remain in the veins even as
Poison
this
va rester
music
dans nos
sours and
veines.
pours into
Même quand la
chaos.
fanfare tournant, nous serons rendus à l'ancienne
Now
énorme.
dignified, we receive
Maintenant,
these
nous sommes
tortures.
dignes de ces tortures.
This host,
Rassemblons fervemment
this
cette promesse
promise,
surhumaine.
this promise to our created
Faites
body
à
and
notre
soul.
corps et
This
à notre âme
promise, this
créée.
promise, this
Cette
madness,
promesse,
this
cette
elegance,
démence,
science,
l'élégance, la science,
violence.
la violence.
This promise that the tree of
On nous a
life will be
promis
buried,
d'enterrer dans l'ombre
tyrannical goodwill
l'arbre
exiled,
du bien et du
so we
mal,
can bring forth pure love,
de déporter les honnêtetés tyranniques afin que nous amenions notre très pur
pure
amour.
love, pure love. It all started with disgust,
commença par
and it will
quelques
stop
dégoûts.
because it can't catch up with
Cela
eternity,
finit, ne pouvant nous saisir sur le champ de cette éternité.
and it will end with a retreat of
Cela
perfumes,
finit par une débandade de parfums.
laughter of children,
Rire des enfants,
discretion of slaves,
discrétion des esclaves,
austerity of virgins,
austérité des vierges,
horror of
horreur
the
des
figure and
figures,
objects
des
here.
objets.
Sacred you are for the
Sacré
memory of
soyez-vous
last
par le
night.
souvenir de cette veille.
It all started with rowdiness and ends with angels of flames and haze. Little white night, little drunkenness, how holy you were. Only for the mask you gratified us with. Your method.
T'affirmons en méthode.
We affirm your method. We
Pas
won't
que tu as
forget.
glorifié hier chacun
We
de
won't
nos
forget
âmes.
that yesterday you glorified all of our ages. We have faith in poison. We know how to give our life fully every day.
Tout entière, tous les jours.
Come, the time, the assassins.
Just thought you got the idea there that Lizzie Mercier Desclous was reading the original French and Patty was reading, or perhaps even improvising. So since that was a little perhaps complex, and besides, I want to read my translation. So yeah, hey, this is my principle of the good and beautiful. I'll never falter in my atrocious boasting fanfare. Hooray for unknown alchemy and the marvelous body, for the first time ever. It began under the laughter of children and will end the same way. This poison will stay diffused through every vein, even when our fanfare fades and folds us back into the old inharmony. And now let us, so worthy of these tortures, feverishly reassemble that surhuman promise once made to our created body and soul, that promise, that madness, elegance, science, violence. We've been promised that the tree of good and evil will be buried in shadow, and the tyranny of honesty be deported, all that we might fetch forth our purest love. It began with a certain disgust. It ends with us unable to seize this eternity on the spot. It ends in a riot of perfumes. Laughter of children, discretion of slaves, austerity of virgins, horror of all shapes and objects here. Bless you all in memory of this holy vigil. Yes, it began with goofiness, but ends with angels of flame and ice. Little stoned vigil, how holy you were, if only for the mask you bestowed upon us. We can vouch for your system, and we won't forget how last night you glorified our every century. We have faith in poison. We know how to give up our lives entirely, every day. Here's the time of the assassins. Okay, next comes A Quick Trip to Alamut by Brian Geisen. This is an unpublished manuscript, never appeared in print anywhere before. Once again, thanks to Grauerholtz. And the reading is by Iggy Pop, and the music is by Paul Schutz. And then next comes Slogans, read by Genesis P. Orridge, with music by Helios Creed and Bill Laswell. These are some selections from a German scholar named von Hammer-Purgstall, who wrote History of the Assassins in 1835. This was another book influential on Brian Geisen and therefore on Bill Burroughs.
When Nizam became prime minister, he named Omar Khayyam state astronomer because he was good at mathematics. Hassan was not, but when he came to the court, on the strength of their romantic bond, Nizam gave him the post of Minister of Finance. While preparing his budget, Hassan sought out the help of Omar, with whom he left overnight all the papers pertinent to his financial report, which he was to read to the Shah and the assembled court in the morning. When the time came, Hassan picked up his papers and read them aloud just as he found them. Everyone gasped and then broke out laughing, louder and louder, as Hassan struggled on, talking what seemed to be utter nonsense until the Shah stopped him and sent him away in disgrace. What had happened was that someone, presumably Omar, or was it Nizam, had not only scrambled the pages, but cut them in four and carefully pasted them together again. Now, this is the random process of discontinuity with which Burroughs and I have been working since 1960, when I called them the cut-ups. Hassan Isaba went home to Ray in a rage, vowing a terrible vengeance on his old pals for having made a fool of him. He fell ill and did not leave his home for weeks on end. Then he went walking one night in the dark and empty bazaar where he was not likely to meet anyone he knew. But as he passed the one stall still open, a lonely cobbler called out to him, offering him a glass of tea. When he sat down with this poor man, the cobbler said quietly, "Welcome. We have been waiting for you. You are that man." Hassan recognized by certain signs that the cobbler was a member of the secret brotherhood of the Ismailians, whose network reached all the way across the Near East to Egypt, where the supposed descendants of Fatima, daughter of Muhammad the Prophet, called themselves caliphs of Cairo with the pretension to rule all of Islam. When Hassan realized the possibilities inherent in such a connection, he said, "Yes, I am that man."
Nothing is too easy, and all
So the characters there were, Nizam was the famous prime minister of Persia, and the Omar referred to as Omar Khayyam, the famous poet. And the legend is that these two men and Hassan-i-Sabah were school fellows together. This, of course, is impossible. It's historically, doesn't make any sense, but it's a lovely legend. And they're all three school fellows together, and they make a vow that whichever one of them comes into power will help the other two. So later on, when Nizam becomes prime minister of Persia, he invites both Hassan-i-Sabah and Omar Khayyam to court. And according to the original legend, then Hassan asks for power and position and money, and later falls out with Nizam, and this part is true, has him assassinated. Nizam was the first famous assassination carried out by Hassan-i-Sabah. And then Omar is supposed to have asked for a little garden where he could just sit around and drink wine and write poetry. So he was safe, you see. But in this version of the story, it seems that Omar and Nizam are both conspiring to screw up Hassan-i-Sabah's papers by cutting them up. I don't know where Brian Geisen got this story. I really don't. I think maybe he made it up. But it has a certain smack of something. I don't know. Anyway, I just thought I'd explain the background to that Brian Geisen. You all know who Brian Geisen was, I presume. I'm not talking into a vacuum here. Okay, on to von Hammer-Purgstall, History of the Assassins. Okay, that was Genesis being incomprehensible there. What he said was, nothing is true and all is allowed was the groundwork of the secret doctrine. This is probably where the nothing is true, all is permitted comes from. And again, nobody knows where von Purgstall found that because it's not in the original sources. Then he says, with the help of God, the ruler of the world, loosened the bands of the law. Blessed be his name. So that's another version of the end of the law there. And of course, it was this aspect, this antinomian aspect that they got from Purgstall that really turned on Burroughs and Geisen. Now we go on to a very mysterious... Oh, this text didn't make the final cut, so I'll have to read it to you from the booklet. It's from a probably spurious book called The Book of the Highest Initiation. Is paradise anything but the pleasures of this present life? Or are the pains of hell anything but the tiresome fatigue which the followers of the religions have to endure in the form of prayer, fast, holy war, and pilgrimage? Know that I have delivered you by this letter of mine from your chains and freed you from your bonds. Whatever is forbidden for the perverted world becomes lawful for you and for those of your degree. I address myself to you with the same words that have been addressed to the Prophet Muhammad when he reached your position. Today you are allowed to eat the good things, and the food of these who have been given the book is allowable for you. In other words, pigs. When the believer reaches the highest degree of faith, he is dispensed from the religious practices. No more fasts for him, no prayers, no pilgrimage, no holy war, no food, drink, dress, or woman whatsoever is forbidden to him. You and your brethren are the heirs that inherit paradise. In this world, however, you inherit its pleasures and enjoyments that are forbidden to the ignorant that cling to the religions of the lawgivers. You are to be congratulated that you are no longer bothered with their religions. Whoever reaches this stage has acquired the keys of heaven and earth, found the philosopher's stone, and is in possession of the great metal. He is dwelling in paradise and drinking from the fountain of life. So that's the most heretical thing I think I've ever read. No modern-day Ismaili would accept this as an authentic text, but, you know, It is an old text, originally in Persian, I think. So, if it was made up by the enemies of the assassins, it was made up a long time ago. Okay, now the next piece, number 18, The Lord of the Resurrection, is read by Hassan. I don't know if any of you know him, one of Bill Laswell's friends. And music by Bill Laswell. And this is from a medley of different sources I won't go into. The next, Assassinations, reading by Nicole Blackman, music by Anton Fear. It's a quote from Nasruddin Tusi, The Rose Garden of Submission. Don't need to explain who all these people are to you now. And then I'll stop again.
Nothing is true, and all is allowed, was the groundwork of the secret doctrine. With the help of God, the ruler of the world loosened the bands of the law. Blessed be his name. Blessed be his name. Is paradise anything but the pleasures of this present life? Or the pains of hell anything but the tiresome fatigue which the followers of the religions have to endure in the form of prayer, fast, holy war, and pilgrimage? Know that I have delivered you by this letter of mine from your chains, and freed you from your bonds. Whatever is forbidden for the perverted world becomes lawful for you and for those of your degree. I address myself to you with the same words that have been addressed to Muhammad when he reached your position. Today, you are allowed to eat the good things, and the food of these who have been given the book is allowable for you. When the believer reaches the highest degree of faith, he is dispensed from the religious practices. No more fasts for him, no prayers, no pilgrimage, no jihad, no food, drink, dress, or woman whatsoever is forbidden to him. You and your brethren are the heirs that inherit paradise. In this world, however, you inherit its pleasures and enjoyments that are forbidden to the ignorant that cling to the religions of the lawgivers. You are to be congratulated that you are no longer bothered with their religions. Whoever reaches this stage has acquired the keys of heaven and earth, found the philosopher's stone, and is in the possession of the great metal. He is dwelling in paradise and drinking from the fountain of life.
People say that paradise is a vineyard, a garden of running waters, golden trees, scented fruits, houris, fairies, and cupbearers, castles of gold and silver, thrones ornamental and bejeweled. As Nasser Khusro says, people would not have the name of highest paradise on their tongues if there were no fried birds, pastry, quails, and puddings there. They say they will drink pure wine. Cupbearers of the Lord will give them pure wine to drink. In this way, people will have hope that they may arrive at God. Paradise is a person.
The houris of paradise are the ideas which at once appear in one's essence when one feels desire. Whatever one wishes, with regard to the perception of the intelligibles, will appear in one's soul, one's essence. Thus shall one's soul be forever in bliss. For the beginning of knowledge and its ultimate aim will have become joined together. This is the achievement of the idea of an angel.
Okay, so now we're to the last three readings. The next one's very, very long, but it's still an outtake from Gérard de Nerval. He wrote some Oriental tales, which are really splendid. Has anybody read them besides Anselm? No, see, not a one. I recommend very highly Gérard de Nerval. This is his tale of the Caliph Hakim. The Caliph Hakim was one of the rulers of Cairo, a very interesting character who supposedly practiced alchemy and. According to one version, he never died. He's going to return at the end of time. So he's one of those. Like King Arthur, there's a whole bunch of them. And in the story, the Caliph Hakim is wandering around the city in disguise, which again is a motif that's always connected to these kind of rulers. And he meets a mysterious young man who introduces him to a new pleasure. And I think that's all you need to know. Oh, it's Genesis again, and Anne Clark with music by Eyeless in Gaza.
He asks me whom I worship. I worship no one, for I myself am God, the one true God, of whom the others are but shadows.
Brother, said Yusuf, you seem weary. Doubtless you have come a long way. Will you take some refreshments? Indeed, my way has been long, replied the stranger. I came into this occult to rest. But what can I drink here, where only forbidden drinks are served? You Muslims, you dare not moisten your mouths with anything but pure water. But we, who are of the sect of the Sabaeans, we can, without offending our law, refresh ourselves with the generous blood of the grape or the fair juice of the barley. But I do not see any fermented drink in front of you. Oh, I have long disdained their vulgar drunkenness, said Yusuf, making a sign to a Negro who set upon the table 2 small glass cups surrounded by silver filigree, and a box filled with a greenish paste, in which was placed an ivory spatula. This box contains the paradise your prophet promised to his believers, and if you were not scrupulous, in 1 hour I would put you in the arms of the houris without making you pass across the bridge of Al-Sirat, he said, laughing. But this paste is hashish, if I'm not mistaken, said the stranger, pushing aside the cup in which Yusuf had put part of the fantastic mixture. And hashish is forbidden. Everything pleasant is forbidden, said Yusuf, swallowing his first spoonful. The stranger looked at him with dark blue eyes, and his forehead contracted in folds so violent that his hair moved with the movement of the skin. For a moment one would have thought that he would spring upon the careless young man and tear him to pieces, but he contained himself, and suddenly changing his mind, stretched out his hand, took the cup, and slowly began to sample the green paste. After a few minutes, the effects of the hashish began to make themselves felt upon the young man and the stranger. A gentle languor spread over all their limbs. A vague smile hovered over their lips. Although they had hardly spent half an hour in each other's company, they felt as though they had known one another for 1,000 years. When the effect of the drug upon them grew stronger, they began to laugh, to move about, and speak with extreme volubility, especially the stranger, who, a strict observer of all the prohibitions, had never before tasted this preparation and felt its effects strongly. He seemed a prey to extraordinary exaltation. Hosts of new thoughts, unheard of and inconceivable, traversed his soul like whirlwinds of fires. His eyes sparkled as though they were lighted from within by the reflection of some unknown world. His demeanor took on a superhuman dignity. Then the vision faded, and he collapsed limply upon the cushions.
I will away and take counsel of ecstasy. Saturn, pale but crowned by a ring of light, increased and came nearer, with the 7 moons about it, which its rapid motion carries with it. And thereafter, who could tell what passed on their arrival in the divine country of their dreams?
That's the Caliph Hakim speaking. So then the last 2 pieces. The first of them is the piece called Assassins from Hakim Bey, read by Hakim Bey. And the last reading, very tiny, is a little line of poetry from Shah Ni'matullah Wali, a Sufi poet again, much beloved by the Ismailis. I'll just tell you what it says. Take one step. See, at the beginning, the first reading, remember, says, "It is no more than 2 steps to the door of the friend. You are stopping with the first step." And the last reading says, "Take one step outside yourself. The whole path lasts no longer than a step." So that with those 2, then we come to the end, and if there's any time left for questions and comments. But here we have first Hakim Bey and then Shah Ni'matullah Wali.
By night, Hassan-i-Sabah, like a civilized wolf in a turban, stretches out on a parapet above the garden and glares at the sky, conning the asterisms of heresy in the mindless, cool desert air. True, in this myth, some aspirant disciples may be ordered to fling themselves off the ramparts into the black, but also true that some of them will learn to fly like sorcerers. The emblem of Alamut holds in the mind a mandal or magic circle lost to history but embedded or imprinted in consciousness. The old man flits like a ghost into tents of kings and bedrooms of theologians, past all locks and guards with forgotten Muslim ninja techniques, leaves behind bad dreams, stilettos on pillows, puissant bribes. The attar of his propaganda seeps into the criminal dreams of ontological anarchism. The heraldry of our obsessions displays the luminous black outlaw banners of the assassins, all of them pretenders to the throne of an imaginal Egypt, an occult space light continuum consumed by still unimagined liberties.
Take one step outside yourself. The whole path lasts no longer than one step.
Oh, in the Hakim Bey piece, the reference to daggers and bags of gold is from an actually very funny story. That there was this mullah who once was preaching very strongly against the assassins, and one morning he woke up and he found on one side of his pillow a dagger and on the other side a big bag of gold. And immediately he stopped his sermons against the assassins. And when his followers noticed this, they said, "Oh, mullah, why have you stopped attacking those terrible heretics?" And he said, "Well, their arguments are very pointed and weighty." So, anyway, this CD was produced by Sub Rosa in Belgium. And if you want to know the address, it's box 808 CM 1000, Brussels, Belgium. Sub Rosa is the name of the company. I haven't the foggiest idea. Someone told me they'd seen it in a very esoteric little shop in New York somewhere. I don't even remember the name. I haven't the slightest idea where you can find this. Wait a minute, let me see.
I got it. I memorized it if you want it. 1-800-366-5121.
It's not even in here. Who are they, Tom?
Last Gasp in San Francisco carries all their CDs.
Oh.
They're really expensive, though.
Yeah.
They have an Artaud one and all these other ones.
Yeah, they're very specialized in the Burroughs-Geisen aesthetic.
366-5121.
Did anybody who wants that get it? Say it really loud, Tom.
1-800-366-5121. At first, they probably won't know what you're talking about if you press and they have it in stock.
What's the title again?
Hashisheen. Hashisheen. The End of Law. And it's, I guess, credited mostly, probably if you mention Bill's name, Bill Laswell, would be certainly more recognizable to the music world than my name. So there it is. Hope you enjoyed it.